All right, everyone, hello. Today is. Let me get like this microphone in a more comfortable position here. I don't know. Hello, right. So today is Sunday, June 29th. I'm recording another astrology video. I've been kind of doing it at a higher frequency than usual. Um, my video that I'm doing right now is for the planet Mars, which has been in Virgo for a little while now. And you will notice that this chart that I have up on the screen is the natal in the center. The inner chart is the natal chart of our Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, and in the outer chart is the transits for the time of recording this. And you will notice that our Prime Minister Mark Carney has stelliums in the signs of Pisces and Virgo, and that Mark Carney has Mars in Virgo conjunct in a stellium with Uranus, Moon, and Pluto, which is quite a significant lineup. And the fact that the planet Mars is transiting Mark Carney's Virgo stellium is a trigger point, basically, to set off this like astrological cluster. Where maybe I shouldn't swear. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and I basically I don't know what to say, because I have to admit that I chose to vote for Mark Carney, and I am maybe experiencing a bit of buyer's remorse in some way. But I think if you take a mature approach to the situation, I think that the spirit of liberalism basically is that you have to make a kind of a compromise, right? And the whole point of this is that there has been a enormous swing towards the right wing. And I also have to admit that when I make my astrology channel, that I if I look at the statistics, I'm able to see the statistics of what kind of people, the demographic information of what kind of people watch my channel. And half of my audience is American, right? And I don't know how much of my audience is even Canadian, but probably it's probably not 50-50, right? Like I probably have, the other half that aren't Americans are probably more spread up throughout different countries, and it's not just all a bunch of Canadian people, right? So I'm a lot of the time I'm just taking this approach because, to me, like, I have to admit that there was some other things in the news recently where there is a major victory in New York City with Zoran Mamdani, and I have yet to really say anything on that because I don't think I have very much to contribute because I've never been to New York. I don't really know that much. I'm not an expert on New York politics. I'm not an expert on this Mamdani guy. I feel more comfortable talking about what is relevant in my own country, in my own life, in my own perspective. And so I feel, for me, it's more resonant, even if Mamdani has all the spotlight right now, to talk about what the hell is going on with Mark Carney. And I'm just, first of all, I would just like to explain why I have a bit of buyer's remorse. And I'll show you this article from the Narwhal, which is also, first of all, I thought I'd just mention, I don't know, it's kind of odd. Have you guys noticed this thing about this triple alliteration using the letter B? Because you have Mark Carney's Build Baby Build, which is a version, like, it's kind of like Donald Trump said drill baby drill, as a kind of this sort of like no holds barred oil and gas like resource exploitation thing. And Mark Carney is trying to, rather than going that far of a right wing approach as drill baby drill, he's trying to be a little bit more central liberal about it by making it build baby build, as in we're going to build the economy up or build infrastructure up or something like that. But what I notice is that you also saw this triple B thing in the big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump passed, or that is maybe the point of some contention in the United States, as well as the bunker busting bombs, right? And so there's some kind of strange thing going on where you've got this repetition 3 by 3 of all these BBB things. I don't know what to make of that. I just thought I'd point it out. But there's anyways, to read this here, it says, you may have noticed that Canadians are in a bit of a mood ever since a certain somebody threatened our sovereignty and economic well-being. The impact has spread to the highest levels of government policy. The federal government, industry, and provinces are seizing the crisis to try and build more stuff more quickly, build baby build, in the words of our Prime Minister, under the premise that it will help reduce our dependency on an increasingly unpredictable neighbor. Bill C5, the One Canadian Economy Act, aims to break down the interprovincial barriers to trade and employment, but also allow projects deemed by the government to be in the national interests to bypass certain regulations in order to speed up construction. It passed the Senate its last parliamentary hurdle on June 26th. It's been labeled a threat to democracy, an insult to Indigenous communities, a rejection of environmental stewardship. Others say it's a necessary response to U.S. hostility and a long-needed jolt to stimulate an economy that is being strangled by overly bureaucratic regulations. And this is basically my take on the whole conflict with the United States, is that I'm not really that worried about the possibility of Canada becoming the 51st state. But what I do see basically the politics working as is that there are certain, it's like, what exactly is your political point of resistance, right? Like, are you and I think this is also with the whole Donald Trump kind of escalating the war in Iran thing, is that you could be like, are you going to what problem are you going to approach and resist? And you could be like, the problem we're going to approach and resist is, let's say, climate change and environmental problems and global warming. And Donald Trump will say, oh, you know what, like, that is small potatoes compared to nuclear apocalypse. So we're gonna set a gauge where it's like, instead of worrying about like climate change and global warming, you're gonna have to worry about fucking nuclear warfare, and we're just gonna inflame the war situation to such an extent where everybody's gonna be like, oh, well, instead of worrying about climate change and environmentalism and all this kind of stuff, we're going to have to worry about like escalating the nuclear, some sort of war thing, right? And this is, and then so the point is like, rather than being like, oh, so instead of we're going to resist becoming the 51st state, rather than resisting building pipelines or resisting, whatever, any sort of making appeals to the Indigenous community, or there's all these sort of like more leftist targets for political resistance. But now, like, oh, we don't have the time for that. We just have to focus on not being taken over by the Americans. So basically, all your complaints about Indigenous people not wanting a pipeline to go through their territory, sorry, we just have to railroad through that because we don't have time, because we have to do all this stuff really quickly, or else, right? And so this is kind of like, I kind of predicted this was going to happen. And I think that if you look at the chart here, we have the Uranus and Pluto. There's something about, and Mars together, there's something about this sort of like feels very urgent, and it goes with this kind of like almost accelerationist kind of thing of like pushing a lot of things through really quickly, regardless of whether it's like disruptive or destructive or stuff like that. And then also, just recently, Mark Carney introduced a digital tax on all these American, like, it's like a way to counteract this whole thing about rent-seeking techno-feudalism, where you're playing cloud rent for all this stuff. And I have to admit, it did remind me that I was paying a subscription for like iCloud that like I really wasn't making use of. So it really remind me that I had some sort of subscriptions to American tech companies that I could cancel to help the nationalistic Canadian boycott against the American tech industry. And now it's been recently announced that Mark Carney has well, I don't know how to what extent the liberal government is behind this, but there's a new national Canada social media platform. I haven't signed up to it yet. I've been taking a break from Facebook and social media. I've been like it does kind of go with this mentality I've been having of like trying to boycott social media and that me, but I don't know. Do I really want to try to get involved on a Canadian social media network? I don't know. But part of the problem is that on Facebook, there's some like you can't share Canadian news sources on Facebook, and also there's all this stuff that certain if Americans share certain things, the link doesn't work because we're in Canada, and it's like Facebook is already basically kind of fucked up, and then on top of that, it's like you've got Mark Zuckerberg being one of these. Oh, I don't know. I have to admit, again, looking at the demographics of my audience, that there's a lot of people that are Americans, and I also noticed that by watching other astrologers, that when it comes to things like some astrologers take this position of just leaving current events and news and politics out of it entirely, and then other people get into it. But I noticed that some of the astrologers who do get into politics are always using these things like prefacing it with this sort of apology to the audience, because you're like, I know a lot of people won't like me for saying this, but yada 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 about, and it's sort of like, there's something about this where I realize that I'm not even sure. I don't know about the whole demographic of what people who are into astrology are like in general, but find there's a certain issue where I don't know if I necessarily get along with a lot of the well, I don't know. Maybe I'm complicating it by making it into this left-right political thing, right? Because what the thing odd about this is that, like, despite the fact that I don't feel like I get along with more conservative or right-wing people, and like what actually tends to happen is that I have a harder time making friends or being in community or being like together with people who share my political beliefs, and then I make content and I attract people to my webpage that have like usernames like Red Pill Girl, or like there's this one follower of my channel who has like a name called like Red Pill Art Girl. I'm like, like what does it mean to be like a red pill woman? And then if that's how you define yourself, what the hell are you doing? Like, I actually, like, for me, I just kind of find it funny, basically, because I can't understand, for one thing, why somebody would, like, make their, like, YouTube handle being a red pill girl, and then you're going to spend all your time watching my videos of all people. Like, it doesn't really, but there is this whole kind of scene of female, red pill women. And I don't know to what extent this is my audience, or I don't know. I don't understand their mentality at all. But it's kind of funny, anyways. But where am I going with all this? There's some other thing that I wanted to get into with this, and I think the best way I'm going to pivot away from talking about just the chart and just the astrology, and I'm going to talk about the fact that I'm not much of a video gamer, but in the post-COVID era, I have basically given in, I don't know, to my inclination to play video games. And one such video game which I have been playing the most has been Elden Ring. And hold on. This is a screenshot that I took. The thing about this is that if you allow me to go on a bit of a ramble or a bit of a side here about video games, is that there's a certain kind of like I was stuck in this game for a while, not making progress, and the boss fights are fairly difficult. So I basically I spent a lot of time just leveling up my character to the point where it wasn't really necessary, or it turned out that there was this certain plot line that was an optional plot line, but you have to do it to unlock the expansion pack. And I should have recorded it, because this was apparently, people say that this one Elden Ring boss, Starscourge Radahn, is like one of the most difficult bosses in the game, but because I was I had gotten to this habit of just pointlessly grinding and leveling up my Elden Ring character and playing as an astrologer mage, basically. And then by the time I got around to fighting Starscourge Radahn, I beat him in one try without like taking a, like because basically if you are a long range magic user, like this boss is apparently really difficult. You can just hang back at long range and use long range attacks on him, and it's like incredibly easy, right? And but anyways, leading up to this, I did take the screenshot because there's certain things that I've noticed that if from an expressionistic kind of point of view, like it feel like I'm why I'm going in with this is because for one thing, the compromise that I've made to vote for Mark Carney, and the fact that like Mark Carney is running for he's a liberal prime minister, but he was hired by Stephen Harper during the Harper government, and he's arguably like a conservative dressed up in liberal clothes. Like instead of like the liberals' strategy for saving themselves from total defeat was to basically have a guy who's like an outranking conservative run so that any conservative voter it was going to just look at like just rather than looking at the party platform, just look at the resume and say that, oh, Carney is obviously the better choice. Pierre Poilievre doesn't have a chance against this guy, but effectively it's just one conservative against another conservative running under the mantle of being a liberal, which is supposed to be center, right? And there's this kind of feeling here where if you look at the banners leading into the Starscourge Radahn boss fight here, that there's the one on the right is very long and the one on the left is very short, right? Similarly, there's where I go for dog walks. I walk my dog every day, and I've been having to pass somebody's minivan that has a Star Wars Rebel Alliance sticker on it, right? But the Star Wars Rebel Alliance sticker has had the left part of the Rebel Alliance thing torn off, right? Like somebody has I don't know if they did it or like if it's just an innocent mistake or somebody scratched it off, but it seems to me to visualize this thing of like the Rebel Alliance, the left wing of being a rebel has been eroded and scratched off, and now there's a right wing monopoly over being rebellious, and now people just take you know what I'm trying to say with this? I don't know. There's some kind of underlying issue here where I just feel like it's like if I was raised a left-wing person, if I continue to have left-wing principles and left-wing values, there's this sort of like the climate in which I live. It feels like the political rug has been pulled from under my feet, and that so I think it could also just be demographics in that apparently all the young men are just conservative nowadays, and there's like and being leftist is just not considered to be cool anymore or something. But I don't know. Anyway, with that in mind, there's also I managed to beat this guy, this Elden Ring boss in one try with my overly leveled astrologer mage. But I thought that I'm really enjoying this video game because of the art direction. Is also a collaboration with George R.R. Martin from Game of Thrones fame. And what I think that there's some interesting sort of like analysis why I'm bringing this up, because I think that this boss character goes with the issue that I'm noticing around the dynamic with Mars in Virgo with the South Node, basically, right? Because now that the South Node is in Virgo, we're having eclipses in Virgo and Pisces, and there's this kind of thing about what the South Node and what the North Node represents is like a kind of a one thing being magnified and amplified and made loud, and that is the North Node is in Pisces, and then another thing being minimized or reduced or negated, and it's said to like reduce both the good parts of it and the bad parts of it. But with this in mind, this kind of like North Node, South Node, and Mars transiting the South Node, like I think that the Radahn image is like why I'm attracted to use this is because if you notice, the whole thing about Radahn is you have this massive warrior with these two massive swords, and he's like he's like gargantuan titan kind of thing, and yet the horse that he's riding, if you look at the horse is like this. Oh wait a minute, maybe it would. Or maybe there's a better way to do this. Maybe instead of oh no, I think no, this is probably good. I'm just pausing about like I don't know how this is going to look. I'm kind of playing around with this new program. If you've noticed, I haven't recorded a video that looked like this. I'm just getting distracted. But this little horse that he's riding is weak, frail, and it looks like the horse is just buckling under the pressure of this massive warrior on top of it, right? And I think there's something to be said about like the American military, and that America is basically by far the most dominant military superpower, and that and yet there's some sort of like weakness to America that is like this horse that's just buckling under the pressure. And it's also interesting that like America has a really bad debt problem, basically, right? And that for all the money that America spends to be the biggest military superpower, America is paying more money to pay off its debts than on its military, right? And this is part of the reason why America is in this kind of like isolationist retreat, I think. And it also explains a lot of the erratic behavior. It's of basically being in a kind of place where you have the dominant position, but that's sliding out from under your feet because it's completely imbalanced because there's like, you have this, it's also interesting. There's a critical theorist named Todd McGowan who talks about this like, there's this Lacanian yin-yang thing, right? Where there's this excess and there's this lack, and it's like the excess is there. Like it's like the basic premise is that this is like a heavily armored gargantuan warrior, but this heavily armored gargantuan warrior gets all of its stuff at the expense of this little horse that is basically it can barely stand the weight of carrying this massive thing around on its back, right? And so it's like it could be the representation of the American working class or the American proletariat or the average people in America versus this massive gargantuan military superpower that they have to keep propped up on their own basic like labor, right? And I mean that you could apply this to like there's this whole kind of issue about America trying to balance out their military and making Canada like Mark Carney has also announced that Canada is like this long-term goal for Canada to get their GDP their military spending to 5% of their GDP, and that's pretty crazy, right? I mean, although apparently like Mark Carney is talking about like stepping it up as like a gradual ladder, right? But if you if you look at like I don't know, maybe I should look this up beforehand, but here you go. Military spending. Is this percentage of the GDP? No. Oh, defense budget as percentage of the GDP. So if you're comparing this to like the countries that spend the most money on their GDP versus their military defense budget, here you have, I think this is supposedly for this year, Ukraine is spending 34% of their GDP on their military. In second place, Israel is spending 8.8%. That's kind of like the double eights is a kind of strange signifier if you know. There's a kind of funny synchronicity. Algeria is spending, you don't hear much about Algeria. They're spending a lot for a country you don't hear much about. Saudi Arabia spending 7, Russia is spending 7, Kuwait is spending 4.8. So basically, like the plan here is to somehow take Canada from where it is today, and then over, not just immediately but gradually, we're going to be somewhere between Kuwait and Russia, and like approaching the, like they're gonna want to make Canada more basically like a country like Israel or Saudi Arabia or the Ukraine, rather than being like a peaceful non-militaristic country, which is like, I kind of like, at some point in time, like I kind of get what they're saying, but like, didn't you think this is kind of funny, right? Like that, do we, like it's also, I'm just saying that, like, if you take into consideration the politics of the West Coast, a lot of the politics of the West Coast involves people who came here as draft dodgers to avoid the draft, to avoid military service, and a lot of what people here value about Canada is its peaceful non-military stance. And I guess I understand that this is a kind of a bargaining move with Mark Carney to try to like appease the pressures of Trump and all this kind of stuff. And there is basically, I guess if America is going to have this Uranus thing, this Uranus return, then I guess, but if you notice, like, where is America on this chart, right? Like, how much of the GDP does America spend on the military? Oh, this is 2024 percentage spending as a percentage of the GDP. America only spends in 2024. America only spent 3.4% of the GDP on the military, and I guess they're wanting Canada to step it up to like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait levels, so that to make up for the fact that we're so low, right? But even look at this: China only 1.7, right? Germany only 1.9. The UK only at 2.3. They want Canada to be spending more on our military than both the UK and the India in relation to our GDP. It's kind of crazy, right? And so I'm just like, and so where do you think this money is going to come from, right? Like, you're gonna have a military that's like this bloated ass guy to take the weight off of America, but there's still gonna be this tiny little horse buckling under the pressure, right? I don't know. This is where what I'm thinking about today. I don't know what my demographic is like, what kind of opinions the people who watch my channel have, but I'm given into just playing some Elden Ring and beating some bosses here. So make of it what you will. Thanks for watching.